your expectation for your meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister tomorrow?
I don't know. He's coming to see me. I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal. Everybody does. They all want to make a deal because we have something that they all want.
You know, I just mentioned to him, don't get bullied, because we know where he's going, and stand firm. We're their #1 customer, and yes, they're our #1 customer, but just be strong, and we have your back.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has touched down in D.C. ahead of the meeting we've been waiting for since he became Prime Minister, a sit-down with U.S. President Donald Trump. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say when asked about the meeting late last week.
Our focus will be on both immediate trade pressures and the broader future economic and security relationship between our two sovereign nations. My government will fight to get the best deal for Canada. We will take all the time necessary, but not more, in order to do so. Do not expect white smoke out of that meeting. There'll be white smoke probably later somewhere else in the world this month, but do not expect that.
Our front bench is back to talk about the prospects for this meeting. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. Shakir, I'll start with you. If you were one of the people in and around the Prime Minister right now, how nervous would you be about the possibility of something going awry tomorrow?
I mean, with Trump, it's always a possibility, but I think, you know, if you even watched that interview yesterday, he clearly has respect for Mark Carney, because he's still calling Justin Trudeau governor, but he's calling Mark Carney the Prime Minister. So I think he's starting from a pretty good base. But I think for Mark Carney, I think one, you know, get the facts straight. I think he needs to understand why Donald Trump, you know, thinks he's subsidizing our country over $200 billion. That doesn't make any sense. Don't be offended by it, but make sure you can point out the factual incorrectness of that statement and build like the fundamentals and chemistry from there. I think also it'd be wise for Mark Carney to kind of put himself in Donald Trump's perspective. Obviously, I know annexation is a non-starter, but I think there's some concerns. There's some underlying things that Donald Trump wants from our country, whether it is critical minerals, whether it is oil and gas, whatever that is. Kind of understand that and use that as a base to kind of move our negotiations forward. And I think on the Canadian side, I know Donald Trump says, you know, he doesn't care about polls and whatnot, but I mean, his management of the economy, the way Americans view his use of tariffs, those things, they're not supporting him on this. And so I think we do have a bit of leverage as we go into this. I think for Donald Trump, as he moves forward into, you know, next year, year and a half, and you get to midterms, people are probably quiet right now for fear of what Donald Trump would do in terms of retribution. But I mean, for American politicians, the thing they care about most is self-preservation. And I think when they start seeing their numbers plummeting and they're going to probably lose their seats, I think they're going to start to speak up against Donald Trump. And I think that gives us a bit of leverage where Trump wants to make a deal. And I think it's going to be time limited in terms of how long it takes for him to get to that deal with our country, given the economic damage tariffs do in our relationship.
Given, Kathleen, that even in those comments today, Trump was so explicit about, you know, making a deal, quote unquote, like Carney wants to come make a deal, do you think the Canadian side will come with some offerings tomorrow?
I think the people around Carney are probably desperate to try to lower expectations about this meeting, right? That this is the first meeting of these two leaders, that it is very workmanlike. Actually, when you compare it to the first meeting that, you know, Trudeau had with Trump in 2017, there was so much pomp and circumstance around that. And already you're seeing by Carney's approach, it's much more straight-laced, if you will, brass tacks. But certainly I think that Carney and the team and the public service have been working with ideas to bring to Trump. But the expectations are real, right? We've got workers who are facing, you know, real threats. Workers on both sides of the border are feeling the pain of the Trump tariffs. We've already seen some constriction in the U.S. economy in the first quarter of 2025. So they're feeling it in their pocketbooks too. But I'm watching really tomorrow for, you know, what ideas get floated. And also, what is the stagecraft of it all, right? You know, obviously, everyone's worried about that Zelensky moment, but also what other moments are there? Again, hearkening back to 2017 with Trudeau, they launched some, you know, task force on women entrepreneurship. Will there be anything like that you know, Carney will float? I don't think so, but there has to be some other things, some other ways of connection between the two administrations that are just beyond, you know, the fight that we have. They have to, like any good meeting, start to build up those relationships and that trust.
Laura, what do you anticipate tomorrow?
I think this is about tone and optics, to be honest. I don't think Canada or Prime Minister Carney is thinking he's going to walk away with any deal from President Trump. And frankly, if he did, I don't know that it could be trusted, right? I mean, this is not the kind of thing that you can hammer out in the Oval Office over a couple of hours. There's a lot of backroom work that needs to be done on reversing any of these tariffs and rebuilding the relationship. I think it is just kind of a trust-building exercise and a bit of a charm offensive on behalf of Prime Minister Carney. I think there's a recognition from both the government and the Canadian public, quite frankly, that you, and Pierre Poilievre, who said it in his rallies, that you can't control the president, and it's all about how you react to him. I think there's probably a bit of nerves around, the wild card moment with President Trump. But I think, for Mr. Carney, the challenge will be just to stay calm, stay measured, look reasonable, and present the case for a rebuilt relationship with the United States. And I think that's the ultimate goal coming out of tomorrow. I don't think we're going to come out with a laundry list of achievements from the Canadian side.
I don't envy anyone, Dan, that has to walk that balancing act. If you think of Keir Starmer's meeting versus Emmanuel Macron's meeting and the different reads on both of those, just by each of them, walking the tightrope a little bit differently and the verdict coming out so differently, good luck, it's not easy.
Yeah, I don't think many leaders have gone into the Oval Office in this Trump administration and left coming out looking stronger, right? I think it's a really tough position to be in with this Trump administration. I think the Carney team has been smart to set expectations low in terms of what we as Canadians can expect to see coming out of this meeting tomorrow. The reality is they just ran a successful election campaign on being the ones to deal with Trump, and that Mark Carney was the guy up to the job. And so the expectations are, I think, all over the place. The reality is, Kathleen mentioned this, there's now a verb of getting Zelensky'd, right? And going into a meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. And so if you set expectations there, I think Mark Carney can come out of that conversation at least with something to say about the path forward. And prior to the Canadian election, Trump was already musing about a negotiating framework, that would be led by secretaries in his cabinet with Canadian officials towards some sort of deal. He referenced deal making yesterday. I think if the two leaders can point towards some conversation around deal making coming out of that, it will be seen as a success. But the reality is, here on this program and across Canadian media, we're going to dissect every part of that interaction, every part of their body language, everything that happens gets said, every bump in the road. And it's going to be overanalyzed to death. But the reality is, I think if Mark Carney can say, look, I got in there without being completely beat up, I have some sense of where we're moving forward as two economies in conversation, I think he'll come out successful.
Not overly analyzed, just fully analyzed, Dan. I promise. From Washington tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Our wonderful front bench. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone.